you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement, et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens, leur 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome. It's the Sick Podcast. I'm Marinaro. On this Thursday, April 25th, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It can be easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially when social gatherings picking up after the winter. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Montreal to get 10% off on your first month. It's also brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. Brought to you by these guys right behind me, and that fridge right over there, that's La Bite TB, brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. La Bite TB offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bite TB, embrace your true nature. It's also brought to you in part by Playground, which I'm going to get to a little bit later on in the program. And thank you all for watching on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. There's something I want to get to right off the bat because I was watching along when you were watching along the Sick Podcast last night. I mentioned from the onset that I pre-recorded the show last night with Craig Button, who was in Helsinki, who are 7 hours ahead of Eastern time. So if I was going to do that show at 10 p.m. live last night, it was going to be 5 a.m. in Finland for Craig Button, and that wasn't going to happen, of course. But throughout the entire hockey season, the regular season that is, in which the Montreal Canadiens are a part of, 90% of the shows, of course, as you know, all start at 10 p.m. live, especially when the Montreal Canadiens play. I got no other choice, right? But during the playoffs, it's a little bit particular, and I'm going to tell you why. There's a lot of 10 p.m. games. There's a lot of 10:30 p.m. games. There's a lot of late starts. And, of course, everyone or who's anyone in hockey works for different publications or different broadcasts or different companies or has different obligations, needs to write, do radio, do television, do podcasts. It's hard to get people on, of course, when these games are going on. Tonight, there's a 7 p.m. game and there's a 7:30 p.m. game, but I'm pre-recording anyway because you got to understand that 7:30 p.m. game, well, it's not going to be over by 10:15 at the minimum. And historically, a lot of playoff games go to overtime. And then all of a sudden, that game that's supposed to end at 10:15, it ends at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to try and go live, of course, when there's going to be off nights in the playoffs, when teams aren't playing, I'll be able to go live. I'm sure I'm going to find a couple of occasions to do that. And I'll try and find a couple of occasions to do it throughout the summer as well. But also this one here so that Pierre McGuire can watch the games and focus on the games. And should they go to overtime, not have to worry that he has to jump on and do the podcast. He can watch it so he can be as prepared as possible. This one, too, is pre-recorded a couple of hours before the games actually start. So without further ado, let's bring him in. He is co-host of the Sick Podcast, The Eye Test with Jimmy Murphy. Pierre, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Tony. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome, Pierre. Pierre, one of the things I wanted to do is the Sick Podcast will go on throughout the entire year, and we'll continue to find topics to talk about the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, yesterday we had a report card day for the duo of Gordon and Hughes, and I did that with Craig Button. But I know you're watching every game in the playoffs, Pierre, and you often talk about the 7-player profile, and nobody knows better than you a composition of a team that can go on to win the Stanley Cup because, of course, you were part of a couple in Pittsburgh as an assistant coach back in the day, once with Scotty Bowman as head coach and once with Bob Johnson as head coach. But what I want to do tonight is I want to take a look at some teams, who they have, what they have, how the Canadiens match up, where they match up, where they don't match up, to see how far behind they are from being, a playoff team or a contender. Now, I'd like to do the teams in the East. And by the way, I can't do them all. So I'm going to choose the teams that are actually up in the series right now, either up 2-0 or up 2-1. Okay? Sounds good?
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Let's start with the Boston Bruins. Let's bring up their lineup of forwards. Okay. Perfect. Pavel Zacha with Pasternak and DeBrusk. Coyle with Geekie and Marchand. Frederick centers Heinen and Van Riemsdyk on the third line. And Boqvist centers Maroon and Beecher. And by the way, there's going to be injuries to every club, and there's some players who aren't there that we're going to talk about as well. And we're going to talk about the depth chart. Let's concentrate on the Bruins, Pierre. Number one, I have to tell you, I'm shocked that a team that lost Patrice Bergeron and lost Krejci and asked for more from Zacha and Coyle, who have now become their top two centermen, in the regular season didn't skip a beat from a year ago. And actually, Coyle and Zacha ended up producing more than Bergeron and Krejci did. I think going into the series that Jim Montgomery got a heck of a lot out of his hockey club. First of all, your thoughts on just that alone. Did you think the Bruins were going to be as good as they were losing Bergeron and Krejci?
No, I did not. But the internal development of the three players that I'm going to talk about right now is really important. Pavel Zacha has grown his game unbelievably. He's a very reliable two-way player, plus he can produce points, and he's physical. Charlie Coyle's been in the league a long time, almost 10 years. And I can tell you right now, Charlie has taken his game up another notch as well, and he's really thriving. He's an offensive point producer, as a playmaker, and as an elite face-off guy and penalty killer. But Trent Frederick, right now, in my opinion, Tony, is the most improved player in the Boston Bruins. And that's a credit to Joe Sacco, one of the assistant coaches, Chris Kelly, one of the assistant coaches, and Jimmy Montgomery, the head coach. They've done a magnificent job internally in Boston making players better. So their strength down the middle is really good. And I see you have Beecher playing on the left wing. Beecher's a natural center iceman, and he's a big, rangy natural center iceman. He just scored his first playoff goal in Game 1 the other night against Toronto. He took some huge faceoffs for the Bruins last night at the end of that game with Toronto when it was a one-goal spread. So Johnny Beecher's actually a natural centerman too. So when you look at the depth down the middle for Boston, it's really deep, and every one of those guys is big. Every single – Zach is big, Coyle's big, Frederick's big, Beecher's big.
Yeah, the lines are courtesy of dailyfaceoff.com. And by the way, injured for the Bruins or out of the lineup are Lucic, Poitras, Forbert, Brazeau, and Andrew Peak. By the way, I should have got to this before, and I didn't, but I'll end the show with it. It's a sad day in the world of hockey. Legendary broadcaster and play-by-play man Bob Cole has passed away at the age of 90. Pierre, I'd love to close out the show getting your thoughts on Bob and what he meant to you and your career, your broadcast career, and maybe just to tell us a quick story. But we'll do this and we'll get to it at the end of the show, if you don't mind. Okay.
No.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So now let's keep the lines up for the Bruins. And I want you to think of the Montreal Canadiens team in your head right now. Mm-hmm. What does Boston have at the forward position that the Canadiens don't have right now?
Number 88 and number 63. So Pasternak and Marchand, that's instantaneous quick strike offensive capability. So if you take away Slavkovsky and you take away Suzuki and you take away Caulfield, Montreal's support players, they don't have that quick strike offensive capability yet, and they don't have guys that can put up those massive numbers that Pasternak has done over the years in terms of goals and what Marchand has done over the years in terms of goals. That's not to say Montreal can't catch up, because I think they can. They're going to have to do it a different way. But that's probably what Boston has, and obviously their size. And we talk about the size down the middle. Don't forget Geekie is a natural center iceman too, and he's a big guy. So, again, I think the one thing Boston has over Montreal at this point is just cumulative size. And to be fair, more depth in goal right now. Both their goalies, Olmark, has proven that he can play, and I think everybody saw what Jeremy Swayman can do last night.
Yeah, a fourth line that has an identity too, I would say, but I think the Canadiens might be okay a couple of years down the line with a Florian Xhekaj and a Luke Tuck.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So right now, Montreal's not there. That doesn't mean they can't catch up. And, I do think Luke Tuck will be in that role. I think Xhekaj will be in that role. The strength of the Canadiens, much like the Bruins, by the way, is going to be their depth on defense. And the Canadiens are building to that, and they're in a real good position. But again, the one thing I'd say the difference is 88 and 63. That's monumental quick strike offensive capability. And even though Jake DeBrusk didn't have a great pure season, he's having one heck of a playoff, Tony. He's having a fantastic playoff.
Pastrnak has had seasons of 34, 35, 38, 48, 40, 61, and 47 goals. And he had 20 goals when they played 48 games. I mean, everyone expects Cole Caulfield to go on and score goals in his National Hockey League career. But, man, it's going to be hard to get to some of those numbers, especially that famous number 61 goals. Wow. So, at one point you said, and I remember this, I believe it was on the Sick Podcast, the Eye Test, of course, where somebody watching asked Pierre, who should the Canadiens draft? And I also asked you at one point, and you said, without a doubt, Cole Yzerman. Looking at the Bruins, you talked about that quick strike offense. It's safe to say you believe the Montreal Canadiens need another guy who can put the puck in the net to maybe support Cole Caulfield or maybe relieve some of that pressure off of him?
Oh, there's no question. But one of the things that's going to happen in Montreal, and I don't know, we haven't really talked about this, you and I, much on the air or off the air, what Lane Hudson brings to the power play. And I think power play points still count the same as 5-on-5 points. So they're important. And if you look at, and I did this today to prepare for your show, Tony.
Yeah.
You look at the bottom 10 teams on the playoffs, that are out of the playoffs, and look where their power plays are. They're all in the bottom 10 of the power play. All of them. It's unbelievable when you look at it. Every team that's from 32 to 22 is out of the playoffs on the power play. Canadiens are one of those teams. Their power play is going to be a lot better next year with Lane Hudson. And so that's going to make it easier for Cole Caulfield. So I think that's something people need to remember. So that's going to help those points. But do the Canadiens need another pure scorer? The answer is yes, they do.
Let's bring up Boston's defense chart now. All right, okay. Here you have it. Lowry, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Witherspoon, Shattenkirk, and, of course, you talked about Swayman and Olmark in goal. We know the Bruins are superior in goal. I mean, they got the best goalie tandem in the league. I think it's probably not even debatable right now. Well, the Islanders are not too shabby, and we'll see. And by the way, goalie change for the Islanders, who look like they're going with Sorokin for Game 3. Their defense, what do they have that the Canadiens don't have?
Size and mobility. McAvoy's a big guy, and he can skate. Lindholm's a big guy, and he can skate. Carlo's a big guy, and he can skate. Witherspoon's a big guy, and he can skate. Shattenkirk's not a big guy, but he's thick. Lowry's a big, lean guy. He's the first player ever born in the state of Louisiana that's played in the National Hockey League. But he's a big, lean guy that can skate. And don't forget, they've got other guys too. Derek Forbert's a big guy. Matt Grzelcyk's not a big guy. He can really skate. So they've got mobility and size. The Canadian strength as an organization right now, I believe, is on defense. And they might not be as big and as quick, but they're going to be giving Boston a run for their money. They're going to have to do it a different way, but I believe they can do it.
Pierre, I take a look at Boston's defense, the one that won the Cup in 2011. Zdeno Chara on that team was 35 years old. Kevin Shattenkirk, who obviously does not impact the game the way Zdeno Chara did, with all due respect to Kevin Shattenkirk, is also 35 years old. I know you've said on more than one occasion that you would not only keep Mike Matheson here for his remaining 2 years on his contract, he's a player that you would extend for so many reasons, one of which you need experienced players on your blue line. You can't have just all young guys. Another being that he's a guy from Montreal, from the West Island, who being traded to Montreal was probably the best thing that could have happened to his career. Played his best hockey with the Canadiens this season, more so than when he played in Florida and more so than when he played in Pittsburgh. And he could be one of those guys who can spread the good word about Montreal around the league. As you take a look at Boston's blue line, and once again, you see Shattenkirk there at 35 years old on a third pairing. Does it, and other teams as well, does it reinforce your opinion that you need defensemen in their 30s come playoff time?
Especially when you have guys that can skate. You know, I'm watching Drew Doughty. He played almost 30 minutes last night in Edmonton. Scored a magnificent goal, really important goal. And if you go watch the tail of that tape, he does a great job. Warren Fogel's going for a kill shot on Drew Doughty deep in the LA King zone. Doughty avoids the hit, gets up the ice, beats all the back checkers, and eventually scores by beating everybody to the net. Well, Drew Doughty, you know, when you look at it, look at his age. I mean, he's right at 35. So, you know, do you need guys like that? The answer is yeah, you do. They're really important guys, and that guys that have won really make a difference. Mike Matheson hasn't won yet in the NHL. I think his winning days are coming, but he's a guy that wants to be in Montreal. His legs aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And when he gets cut back, when guys start to pass him on the depth chart and he's playing the role of, let's say, Kevin Shattenkirk, he's going to be really good. When you cut his ice time from 28 minutes to 16 or 17 minutes, he's going to be really good.
We haven't even talked about Hampus Lindholm, who's 30 years old, Pierre, but if I believe he's under contract for the next 5 or 6 seasons after this season and a cap hit of $6.5 million.
Yeah, no, Hampus is a tremendous player. He's big, he's rangy. So I'm surprised by the media, Tony. I have to tell you this. I watch every game like you do. And people are actually reporting that it's Brandon Carlo playing in a matchup situation, but they never put Hampus Lindholm in there. He's playing with Brandon Carlo. So they're in the matchup against Bertuzzi and against Domi and against Matthews. In game one, they did a magnificent job. They dominated that line. Game two, they weren't as good. Part of that is because the coach from Toronto, Sheldon Keefe, did a better job getting Matthews away from the matchup. In game three, I thought Joe Sacco, who changes the defense for Boston, did a really good job getting Hampus Lindholm and Brandon Carlo on the ice to drive those guys crazy. Matthews wasn't as good. Bertuzzi wasn't as good. Domi wasn't as good because Joe Sacco was more engaged in the matchup situation. They didn't worry about the forwards as much. They worried about the defense. Hampus Lindholm's a really good player. That was a heck of a pickup by Donnie Sweeney, getting him out of Anaheim. And for them to sign him immediately to a long-term extension was huge, really important.
Speaking of the Toronto Maple Leafs, let's bring them up and let's take a look at their forwards. Why not? All right, so we're going to take a look at 5 teams that are in the playoffs in the East, all right? 5. The Bruins were the first one, and we're going to choose the Toronto Maple Leafs as the second one. Austin Matthews, Max Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, John Tavares in between Mitch Marner and Matthew Nyes, Pontus Holmberg, Kalle Järnkrok, and Nicholas Robertson, and a fourth line of David Kampf, Ryan Reeves, and Connor Dewar. We have to mention, of course, that if William Nylander is healthy, he's on that line with Austin Matthews. Nylander, who, by the way, it's been reported, the reason why he's missed the first 3 games of the series, migraines, really bad migraines, and they don't know if it's concussion symptoms or not, but he's not up to it right now. Your thoughts on William Nylander, and then we'll take a look at Toronto's depth chart, Pierre.
Well, Willie's an important part of it, but I don't want to discount what Bobby McMahon would mean to this team too, Tony. We haven't talked about Bobby McMahon. He was a free agent coming out of Colgate University, went to the East Coast League, earned his way up to the American League, and he earned an NHL contract this year after being a third-year pro. Bobby McMahon would be in that lineup, and he would probably be playing where Matthew Nyes is right now, and that would bump Nyes down. And it would be interesting to see where they would move either Domi or Bertuzzi when they put Nylander up with Matthews. So it would give the Leafs more depth. Would Nylander make a difference offensively? Would he help their power play? That's 1 for 11 in the series. The answer is yes, he would. He would help their power play significantly. That's really been the tail of the tape so far. Boston scored on the power play in this series. Toronto has not. They've got 1 out of 11, so it's been a big problem. But Willie Nylander's a real good player. He's a really, really good offensive player.
Pierre, the tough guy on the team, quote unquote, the enforcer. We saw that Matt Rempe was able to impact the game the other night, actually scored a big goal for them I have to tell you, I'm a little bit surprised that he was playing because I wouldn't have bet on it a couple of months ago. Ryan Reeves in the lineup for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You believe that there's still a role to have that kind of player on your team playing playoff games?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. These are so ferocious. I'm looking at the hit chart for these games. In the game one, there were 100 and something hits between Toronto and Boston, 52 to 51, something like that, 53, 51. It was crazy, over 100 hits. I'm watching the hit packages from last night, Vegas and Dallas, over 100 hits. LA and Edmonton, over 100 hits. Tony, that's a lot of hitting. That's a lot of hitting in games. So you need to have that. And I'm going to use a term that the man that hired me in Hartford used a lot in some of our meetings, Brian Burke. It's really important. I still see it. You need to have a nuclear deterrent. If you don't have one, the other team could take advantage of you and make you pay a price to the point where it could affect whether you win or lose if you win a playoff series just because you're not tough enough.
Should the Canadiens, on that note, go out and try to acquire a player who is an enforcer, who knows how to play the game and, won't look at a place if he plays his 9 minutes a game? And I'm thinking of, would it be worth it to place a call to Philadelphia, maybe try and get Nicolas Deslauriers back or someone else? Is there another name that comes to mind for you? Or
Matthew Olivier in Columbus?
That's a good name.
That comes to mind. But how about Arbor Jacki?
So you can have that deterrent doesn't have to be on your fourth line.
No, he doesn't have to. He could. What happens if you dress 11 and 7? What happens? There's a lot of different ways to do. That's why I said the Canadiens are going to have to figure out a way, Tony, to do it differently for the next couple of years. They're going to, and I think the coaching staff can do that because there is some imperfection in their lineup, and it's only because the rebuild really only started a couple of years ago. They're way ahead of where I thought they'd be. They deserve a huge amount of credit. I don't know what you gave them for grades as a management team, but I would give them an A, Tony. I don't know what you gave them, but I would give them an A.
Craig Button gave them an A.
Okay, I didn't know that, but I'm telling you. And the only reason I wasn't watching your show is because I was watching games. Just so you know.
I got it. Don't worry about it. I'm not offended whatsoever. But,
no, but I want you to know, I'm a big fan. But anyways,
thank you. I know that.
To get to where we have to go, the Canadiens roster is still imperfect. Now, will Kirby Dach help it? He's going to help it a lot. A healthy Caden Gooley, he's going to help it a lot. Lane Hudson being there, it's going to help it a lot. There's a lot to like coming up going forward. Jacob Fowler's going to make a huge difference for this team. He's just not ready to play in the NHL. Could they sign him and put him in Laval? Yeah, 100% they could.
But this Toronto team, how can the Canadiens catch up? Although they're not perfect players, and the Canadiens have some very good players, I want people to hear me out on this. I don't think they have a Matthews, a Marner, and a Nylander in the way that they play, right?
Right on. Well, Tony, I'll tell you this. Colorado's got a guy like Austin Matthews, but they only have one. His name is Nate McKinnon. They have two in Edmonton, Draisaitl and McDavid. Okay, and then you start telling me around the league who else has somebody like Austin Matthews. They're not a lot of teams. They're not. Hey, I'm the biggest Ansei Kopitar known to man, but Ansei was 18 years old in 2005. The end's coming. He was great last night in Edmonton, so there's not a lot of guys like that. Do I think Leo Carlsson and Anaheim have a chance to be like that? I do. I think Leo Carlsson could be amazingly good. Do I think Will Smith, who plays at Boston College, has a chance? Yeah, I do. Do I think Macklin Celebrini eventually has a chance? Maybe not offensively, but as a Jonathan Taves type? Yeah. So there are guys like that, but not a lot of teams have Austin Matthews, Tony. They just don't.
All right. Okay. So what do the Leafs don't have that the Canadiens have?
Young depth on defense. The Leafs do not. They do not. And that's going to be a problem. I watched their American League team play a lot. They played Belleville last night in Belleville. They lost 3-1. They don't have a lot of young defense that's going to be able to transition to the NHL level. The Canadiens do. And I think that's a problem for Toronto long term.
And there's the defense, of course, Morgan Riley, Lyubushkin, Benoit, McCabe, Edmondson, and Liljegren. Samsonov and Wall are in goal. Of course, Klingberg is hurt on defense right now. Murray's hurt in goal, so there's a couple of injuries there. So young depth on defense, yeah. For Toronto to take the extra step.
Riley's not young. Labushkin's not young. Benoit is a free agent out of the Quebec League. He played in Anaheim before he came to Toronto. McCabe is, played in the 2015 World Junior, and he's had a lot of injuries. Edmondson's old, as you know, in Montreal. Liljegren's a young guy, but I think he's slotted perfectly. And I don't think Liljegren's going to be a better player than Lane Hudson. And I don't think he's going to be a better player than Caden Goulet. So, I look at that, and then you tell me about Samsonov and Wall. Wall played at Boston College, and that's where Jacob Fowler plays. And I can tell you right now, there's no comparison. And I mean, no disrespect, man, to Wall. I think Joseph's a really good goalie. He is. Do I think he's a starting goalie in the NHL? I don't. Samsonov, he is what he is. You see some nights he's really good, some nights he's not. I can tell you Jacob Fowler's really good. Jacob Fowler's really good.
Awesome stuff. All right, let's go to another series now. Let's go to the New York Rangers. New York Rangers. Wow. Zibanejad with Roslovic, who probably would have been Blake Wheeler had he not been out with the injury, and Kreider.
Yes.
Trocheck with Alexis Lafreniere and Artemi Panarin. Wenberg with Kako and Cooley. And Barclay Goodrow with Matt Rempe and Jimmy Vesey. Once again, if we're going to talk about some injuries that the New York Rangers have, because the New York Rangers have injuries as well. I'm thinking of who would come to mind.
Philip Hedl.
Phil, yes, of course. Hedl is out with an injury, yes, and also injured is Wheeler. Okay, Hedl and Wheeler. Where are the Canadians short here on what the Rangers have? What do they have that the Canadians don't have?
They've got the number one face-off team in the league. Zibanejad, Trocheck, Wenberg, and Goudreau are amazing on draws. They dominate face-offs. Go look at the face-off stats for the Rangers through the first two games of this series.
Yeah.
It's almost a 20 percentage point difference from Washington. That's massive when you're a puck possession.
My God, just looking at them, Pierre, the spine of that team is amazing, eh?
It is. So, and then you got big bodies. Kreider's a huge person, and he can wheel, and he can crush you at the point of attack. Lafreniere, just, ask Vinny Iorio. Vinny Iorio is such a good kid. I coached Vinny Iorio numerous summer tournaments when he was a kid growing up before he went to play for the Brandon Wheat Kings. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. He's a big, strong kid. When Alexis Lafreniere hit him the other day and pulverized him, people are like, whoa, where did that come from? Well, Alexis Lafreniere is a big guy. Capo Caco was a second overall pick. I mean, think about it. Cooley's a really good player. He's a big, young kid that can skate and score and hammer you. Wenberg's a brilliant player. And, when Barclay Goodrow was winning Stanley Cups in Tampa, he was playing on a third line with Yanni Gordon, Blake Coleman. He wasn't a fourth line center. So, I mean, that's a really good team.
How does Suzuki, going forward in a year or two from now, once they gather a little bit more experience, how do you think Suzuki would match up with Zibanejad, and how do you think Kirby Dach would match up with Vincent Trocheck, and how do you think an Alex Newhook would match up with an Alex Wenberg?
Great question. So let's just do Suzuki with Zibanejad right now. I think pretty similar. The only difference between Mika and him is I think Suzuki's probably a better playmaker. I think Zibanejad's a better shooter, and Zibanejad's bigger than him right now. Bigger and more solid, more of a proven pro. He's obviously more mature. Kirby Dach is bigger than Vinny Trocheck. He's not as good on faceoffs, and he's not as good a playmaker. He's not. Vinny's a really good. All going back to when Vinny was a kid growing up in Pittsburgh. He's always a really good, slick playmaker. So
Pierre, if I can, I like Kirby Dach a lot. I don't think he's as good a 200-foot player as Vinny Trocheck is either. Not at this stage of his career anyway.
He's not. But here's the one thing I'd say. Part of why Vinny was not in Florida for long, and part of why he wasn't in Carolina for long, is because he wasn't a great 200-foot player. And one of the reasons why he's become a real good New York Ranger, he realized he liked it there and he didn't want to go anywhere else, so he became a 200-foot player. And one of the best things that happened to him, I'm going to tell you right now, the addition of Michael Pekka to the coaching staff in New York. Their face-off play was haphazard. Michael Pekka goes there as an assistant, and all of a sudden they're one of the top face-off teams in the league, and Trocheck's one of the top 3 guys in the league because he got influenced by a coach. And so if you ask me, there's one thing that Suzuki has to do better. He needs to do what Sidney Crosby did back in 2005, 2006, 2007. Go look at his face-off numbers. They were terrible. He wasn't afraid to ask people for help. How do I get better on face-offs? And then Crosby became one of the best face-off guys in the league. That's what Suzuki needs to do.
Well, I wouldn't mind moving to South Florida. So if somebody from the Panthers is watching, I don't know how to play hockey, but there's other things I can do. I promise you I will be as complete an employee as I can be and play that 200-foot game. All right, okay. The Rangers defense. I like the Rangers defense. Let's get to it.
How could you not?
Yeah. Lindgren with Adam Fox, Keandre Miller with Braden Schneider, Eric Gustafsson with Jacob Trouba. It's funny. It makes me laugh when I see Eric Gustafsson. He played on that Canadiens team that went to the Stanley Cup final a couple of years ago. He's known as a defensive liability, but he's good in transition and he takes chances. I get it, but he's got pretty soft hands and pretty good on the power play.
This is a perfect example, and it's all great points by you. This is an excellent example of a coach trusting a player. Laviolette had Gustafsson before in other markets. So he trusts him to be that second power play guy, point producer, good first puck mover. But look where he is in the lineup. He's not playing ahead of Keandre Miller. He's not playing ahead of Ryan Lindgren. So his minutes are reduced, and he's not going to be exposed as much in bad matchup situations. And he's playing with a complete, behemoth in Jacob Trouba. Now, it wasn't that long ago when Jacob Trouba was playing where Adam Fox is playing. And so one of the things that's happened here is Braden Schneider has improved unbelievably there. And he's moved from being a 6'7" to a 4. And I think Phil Housley deserves a lot of credit for that. Phil Housley's coaching the defense in New York. And I think Phil deserves a lot of credit for the internal development of Braden Schneider.
Pierre, I don't know if I'm off here, okay? And maybe I am. I've been off before and I'm going to be off again. I take a look at this defense, and I visualize what the Montreal Canadiens have on defense. Out of all the defense corps in the National Hockey League, with what the Canadiens have, and, the cupboards are full, can they resemble the Rangers defense probably more so than any other defense in the National Hockey League? Because you've made comparables that Lane Hudson could probably be Adam Fox. And I think of, Jacob Trouba, and there could be a hard-hitting either, I don't know, a Struble or a Caden Gooley. And I think of a Keandre Miller, and it could be one of those two other guys. And you understand my question? Can the Canadiens' defense be the Rangers' defense one day?
Very similar. You just have to discount which way guys shoot. Like Lane Hudson's a lefty, Adam Fox is a righty. So, you just discount the way guys shoot. But I would say the answer is yes. So my comparable on Gooley is Ryan Lindgren, except Gooley's got more offense than Ryan Lindgren. They're very similar. Tough kids. They can pivot and go. They can match up against top players. They're not afraid to be physical. So the answer is yes. The one player that the Rangers have that hasn't tapped out yet in terms of progress, but he's really improved this year, Keandre Miller. Tony, I'm telling you, I remember talking to that kid when I was at the University of Wisconsin. Their former coach, Tony Marinaro, asked me to come up there and speak to some of the players. And I spoke to Keandre, and I was blown away, Tony. I'm telling you how big, strong, and in shape he was back then when he was a college player. So, he's
a man. He's a man.
The Montreal Canadiens really don't have a guy that has that skill set, if you would follow me.
Yes.
But all the other players, I think there's a lot of comparables for what the Canadiens' defense is. A lot of comparables.
I like what you said there, because when the Canadiens drafted Struble, Marc Bergevin seen on Habs TV saying this guy's a Greek god, and they say he's a physical specimen. And what we're hearing out of the Canadiens is there's nobody that is quite put together and built or as strong as Struble, but he doesn't have the hands and the offensive attributes that Keandre Miller has. It's not.
I know both players really well. And
you saw Struble at St. Sebastian's, I would imagine.
I did numerous times, and I saw pretty intense physical battles between my son and Struble, and it was great to watch. It really was. That's what I started to say. This kid's pretty tough. He endured some big hits in those prep school games, and I watched him in college. So I knew his body of work, but he doesn't have the athleticism in terms of skill that Keandre Miller does. He does not.
Pierre, not a bad situation when you have a goalie who won a couple of Stanley Cups as your backup, huh?
Plus, he's a local kid. I mean, he grew up in Connecticut. He played for the Mid-Fairfield team that had Max Pacioretty on it, Cam Atkinson on it. So, there's some street cred, too, because all those guys go back to Connecticut in the summer. And, now Jonathan's part of the New York Rangers. And so that's pretty cool, too.
Yeah.
Quickie's a really interesting story. He played at an elite prep school called Avon Old Farms. He played for an amazing coach, John Gardner. He had a quick bite of lunch at University of Massachusetts Amherst, so all around the New York area. And then he goes out to L.A. and he thrives, obviously. But he married a Connecticut girl whose father used to play for the New York Rangers, Mike Backman. So there's a big Ranger legacy in his family now. And I think that really makes him a proud guy to be there. I really do.
So now I'm going to put you on the spot if I haven't already. You've talked about Jacob Fowler, and we know the admiration. It's more than one occasion that you've talked to us about him over the last year or so. There's some pretty good goalies in the playoffs, especially in the East. I think of Shesterkin as one. I think of Vasilevsky with Tampa Bay.
How about Bobrovsky?
Bobrovsky with Florida, obviously, and we're going to get to them next.
Yeah.
These are goalies that have won a Stanley Cup already in Vasilevsky, went to the Stanley Cup final last year in Bobrovsky. And I could definitely see Igor Shesterkin being on a team that wins a Stanley Cup one day. Can Fowler be in that category? That's a huge category. That's an elite category.
It is, and the answer is yes. I can just say this. I wish Marty Brodeur was on your show with me right now. I remember when Marty Brodeur was 16 years old and he was playing midget AAA for Montreal Bourassa in the east end of Montreal in St. Leonard. And I tried to recruit him. He came and visited where I was coaching at St. Lawrence University. And I had never seen a goalie at that age be that good. Now, obviously, that's kind of when my career started. So we're going back to the late 1980s. I never saw Ken Dryden. I never saw any of those guys. I never saw Grant Fuhr. He's my peer. I never saw him. I was never out west. I watched him play in the NHL, but I never scouted him until I got to the NHL. And the Fowler thing, I've recruited and watched a lot of goalies over since, 40-something years. I would just say Jacob Fowler and Trey Augustine at Michigan State are two of the better guys I've seen in a long time. They're really good. Augustine's owned by Detroit. Fowler's owned by Montreal, obviously. And both of them very similar. Their capacity to digest the game and react to it without being over-aggressive, just being calm and cool and collected. Both of them remind me of Marty that way. Marty Brodeur.
Wow, amazing. Let's get to the Florida Panthers. We're speaking of great goaltenders, of course. Our buddy Roberto Luongo works for the Florida Panthers.
Who the goalie was after Marty played at Montreal Bourassa?
Roberto Luongo.
Jose Theodore was there too. Eric Fischel was there. A lot of guys over there.
They all had the same goalie coach, by the way. Would you know who that name is?
No, you give it to me. Mario
Betti.
Oh, was it Mario? Okay.
Yeah. Mario Betti was their goalie coach, it's a story that has been said to me on a couple of occasions from Normand Flynn, who works for RDS.
Well, Normand was Brodeur's coach at St. Ice.
He was Berserk's coach at St. Ice, and that's exactly correct. All right, okay. So, and we say hello to Normand if he's watching. Salut, Normand.
How you doing, Norm?
All right, okay. The Florida Panthers. My God, what a team. Barkov, Reinhart, Tarasenko. Lundell centering the second line right now because Bennett's out with an injury. Else that would be Sam Bennett with Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe. Stenlund would be your fourth line centerman, and Lundell would be your third, of course. Rodriguez is on the right wing. Westerainen is on the left wing, and Lomberg is on the wing of a fourth line with Cousins also on the other wing. You've mentioned size on a couple of occasions. That's a big team, Pierre. That's a big team.
As a football team, because they don't have Sammy Bennett there. Sammy Bennett's a huge guy too.
Yeah.
And Sammy Bennett, I would love to have him on my team, Tony. He's just not a nice guy on the ice.
Wow.
He's a bad man on the ice. He is.
That's okay, because nice guys finish last.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's a guy you don't want to play against him. It's like when, for Montreal Canadiens fans, Doug Riseborough is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But Doug Riseborough was no fun to play against. Mario Tremblay, great guy, just not a lot of fun to play against. And I would say the same thing about Sammy Bennett. So the number one thing that stands out to me about Florida's team is their size and the way they've structured their lineup. Kevin Stenlund is not a point producer. He's an elite faceoff guy. He's a top-end penalty killer. He's not going to complain when he only gets 8 to 10 minutes a game. He can play upwards of 14, but as a guy at the end of every period when you got a 1-goal lead, you can trust him to be on the ice. At the end of a game when you got a 1 or 2 goal lead and the other team's pulled the goalie, you can trust him on the ice. So he's a boutique hire is what I like to call guys like that. Not every team recognizes the need to have that type of player. He's an important player. Like, I would tell you this. I'll use an example. Stenlund was available in the expansion draft to Seattle. Okay, when Seattle came in the league. And I was working in Ottawa then. And I said, I'll be shocked, knowing Ronnie Francis. I'll be shocked if they don't take Stenlund. Well, they didn't take him. They didn't take him. But if you look at it now, I bet you they wish they had.
Pierre, as we try and figure out how close the Canadiens are to some of these teams, how they match up, how they don't match up, I take a look at this Florida team, and I know this as much as the Canadiens can be good, they're going to have to be really good to be able to have a team like this Florida team. Like it's not all that flawed, is it?
No, it's not a flawed team, but you got to remember now, Reinhardt's got the potential to be an unrestricted free agent.
Correct.
Is going to be an unrestricted free agent. I don't know if they're going to give hometown discounts or not.
Yeah.
The bottom of their lineup is not that much better than the Canadiens. Stenlund, I think, is better than what the Canadiens have. But Jake Evans is a very improved player, Tony. You can't discount what Jake Evans has done there. He's an improved player.
Yes, like him.
Just not as big.
Yeah.
Stenlund doesn't skate like Jake, but Jake's not big like Stenlund. But similarities. My point is that those bottom 6, the Canadiens aren't far removed from that. The problem is, when you got Bennett in the lineup, Lundell slides down.
Yeah.
And then he's a difference maker because that moves Stenlund down and that moves Lorentz out of the lineup. That's part of the issue there. But
yeah,
right.
let's bring up their defense if we can, Pierre. For the Florida Panthers. Here we go. It's funny because I wait for the charts to come up, and I know that Pierre can rattle them like off the top of his head, just like that. Forsling with Ekblad and Mikkola with Montour, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson with Dmitry Kulikov, Bobrovsky and Stolarz in goal. I take a look at their defense. With all due respect to Dmitry Kulikov, I think they should have probably tried to find an upgrade at the deadline. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. Same with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Big name, hasn't really produced that much. Didn't produce in Arizona, didn't produce in Vancouver. And he's, for the money that he's been paid over time, he's playing as a 5'6" guy in Florida. Part of and I will say this with clear confidence, Paul Maurice deserves a lot of credit there, along with Sylvain Lefebvre, the former Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leaf defenseman.
Yeah.
They work with these guys, but the system protects the Florida defense. It's not an elite defense. The system. It's like when you played for Pat Burns back in the day, Tony. I would tell you right now, the most important guy on the team, and the guy would tell you, all the guys that ever played for him, they tell you the same thing. If you were a goalie playing for Pat Burns, your numbers always went up. They always went up because he protected the goal. Just his systems protected the goals.
Like Ken Hitchcock did with Mason and Leclerc.
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah,
100%.
And as good as Marty Brodeur was, I mean, you had pretty good stats if you played for Jacques Lemaire.
And who did Pat learn from? Pat learned from Jacques Lemaire.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So that defense, I think, has been insulated fantastically well by the coaching staff in Florida.
I still looking at this defense. I think they should have gone for it for David Savard. But anyway, I digress. Carolina, I won't even bring them up because as much as they have some really good players and Aho and Svechnikov and Nishkash and Teravainen and the list goes on. I love Seth Jarvis. Seth Jarvis, I'm crazy about this guy. I kind of think their MVP is Rod Brind'Amour. I think he's a very modern day coach. I don't know if he's one of the best coaches in the National Hockey League or it's just my preference that I think that he is, Pierre. My question to you is, do you think that Marty St. Louis could coach like Rod Brind'Amour in a couple of years from now?
Yeah, I do. So there's one difference. Marty will have more of an impact on the power play. Rod has a huge impact on the penalty kill. Jeff Daniels and Rod. I coached Jeff Daniels in Pittsburgh, and I also had him in Muskegon in the old IHL. Really cerebral, smart guy. I call him Bob Gainey light because he played like Bob Gainey. Tim Gleason does a great job with their defensemen. That's their staff in Carolina. Rod's insulated fantastically well by a good staff, but Rod Brindamore is one of the top 3 coaches in the league. There's no question in my mind. He's one of the top 3 coaches in the league. They owe him a contract. We'll see if he gets one or not when the playoffs are over. The thing about Carolina, unless you study it day in and day out, you won't pay attention to it. It's okay. I get it. Carolina's got 10 guys. 10. They have the potential to be unrestricted free agents at the end of this year.
Wow.
That's not counting the RFAs. I'm telling you, they got a boatload. Donnie Waddell's a GM there. They got a boatload of work to do there. A boatload of work.
You remember what the Montreal Canadiens did in 2009, Pierre, in the centennial year? Give or take, I think they had about 10 guys that were going unrestricted free agent. They didn't want to part ways with them because it was the year of the centennial, so they just tried to make the playoffs and then pull off a miracle versus Boston in the playoffs. It didn't happen. They got swept in the first round. They all walked, and they got nothing for any of them. Yep. That sets you back big time. Pierre, I wanted to concentrate on a lot of teams in the East because it would have been too long a show if we would have done all the teams. Mind you, I know you would have been up to it. But of course, for the Canadiens to go far, those are the teams they have to compete with, and those are the teams they have to get by if they want to make it to the Stanley Cup final one day. So I think it was worth the exercise, and there was nobody better to pull it off but you, and you pulled it off like a charm, as you always do. He is the co-host of the Sick Podcast, The Eye Test with Jimmy Murphy. He is the one. He is the only. He's the incomparable Pierre McGuire. Pierre, in ending, Bob Cole passed away today. Yep. At the beautiful age of 90, mind you. I think it's safe to say he lived a fantastic life. So many memories, coming in. One of them, that's Bob Cole's voice on, and now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup here. So many great people have done play-by-play in hockey. Nobody had a voice like Bob Cole's.
He's really good. Danny Gallivan was really good. Foster Hewitt was really good. The man that I worked with for 16 years, Doc Emmerich, phenomenal. I've been so fortunate in my broadcasting career to work with Chris Cuthbert and do NHL and Olympics, Gordon Miller to do NHL and the World Junior for so many years. But his voice was special. Bob Cole. I have so many good Bob Cole stories, and they're all so positive. Most people don't know he wasn't just a great broadcaster. He was an elite curler. He won the Brier. He was an elite.
Wow.
Curler. Yeah. Bob Cole was an elite curler. So one of the first times I met Bob was at the 1991 Stanley Cup Final. I was involved with the Penguins, and he was obviously broadcasting the games. And I was sitting with Scotty, and Bob comes over. Hey, Scott, how you doing? The way Tyler waddle in. Hey, Scott, how you doing? Scott, Mr. Bowman goes to him. He says, meet my assistant, Pierre McGuire. And Bob shakes my hand. He wasn't a big guy, but he was strong. I didn't want to hurt him. Anyways, he shakes my hand, squeezes. So I squeezed it back. Good handshake, son. Good handshake. And then what I really liked about later on in my career, Bob would lived in Newfoundland.
Yes.
And he would come in to do the games, whether it was in Toronto or Montreal. He'd fly in, and he'd usually fly in on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and he would listen to the games of either the Maple Leafs or the Canadiens on radio. He would get them taped, and he'd listen to the radio games.
Wow.
And I was doing the radio for the Canadiens. And he'd come up to me before the games he worked in Montreal and say, tell me about this guy. Tell me about that guy. I listened. He was so prepared. And I listened to your broadcast. I want to know about this guy. He was amazing that way. And there were some nights, too, away from hockey that were a lot of fun as well.
Wow. I remember, Pierre, his daughter used to, for a short amount of time, his daughter used to work at TSN Radio when I was working there. And I think she was doing an internship or something. And I just remember telling her, every time I would see her, I would tell her, your dad's a legend, eh? Your dad's a legend. And he was a living legend. Now he's no longer with us, and he will continue to be a legend in the business. His voice will be eternal. So our thoughts and prayers go out to to Bob Cole's family and friends. May you rest in peace. Thank you, Pierre, once again for doing this. Much obliged. Thank you.
Really my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
All right, there you have it. The great Pierre McGuire of the Sick Podcast, The Eye Test. Thank you all for watching on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And I want to also special thanks to Playground, Rock and Roll Night at Playground with orchestra. Never before has the world of the legendary Kiss been revisited in such a grandiose way. So shut it out loud on Friday, April 26th at 8 p.m. The show will take place under the Grand Marquee, a beautiful temporary structure that's perfect for electrifying events like this one. Playground, your entertainment destination. Visit playground.ca for tickets. All right. Okay. So once again, special thanks to all of our partners and all of our sponsors. This episode was sponsored by BetterHelp. Also, special thanks to Energy Transportation Group, La Bita TV, and of course, Playground. Thank you all for watching. Leave us a 5-star review if you can on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. For Agnello and Sammy at Master Control, they're Cavallaro. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. La Vida TV, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.